fuse is a overcurrent protection device. We use the fuse to protect the equipment from the overcurrent. There are different types of fuses. Now we are discussing the classification of fuses. Even though we do not use all these types of fuses, majority for our purposes in the RPS and in decade resistance box, we observe some cartridge fuses, glass cartridge fuses. They are operating with the DC voltage. So those types of fuses are called as DC fuses. If the fuses are being operated with the AC voltage, then they are called as AC fuses. And in AC fuses, we have low voltage fuses and high voltage fuses. Similarly, in DC also, when we are operating for very high voltages, we can utilize the high voltage fuses. Ampere rating of the fuses also changes. Depending on that, the price of the fuse also changes. If the fuse is operated for the more ampere rating, if it can withstand more current, then the cost of the fuse is obviously higher. We observe in the glass cartridge fuses. These low and high voltage fuses are further classified into some categories. See here, rewirable fuses. Whenever the fuse melts, if we use a copper wire or any metallic wire, very short piece of wire, if it melts, if we can replace that wire, then that fuse is called as rewirable fuses. These rewirable fuses we do not use in the high voltage fuses, because they are operating at the high voltages. We do not replace, we do not rewire there. And there are switch type fuses. These switch type fuses also we do not use in the high voltages, because at the moment we are trying to operate, in general cases also, when we use the switches, when we try to operate, when we turn on the switch for a fan, it gives the huge amount of current. It takes the huge amount of the current. When we want to turn on any vehicle, it consumes more amount of the petrol at the start point. So when the turn off or turn on mechanism of a switch, it is taking from on state to the off state or off state to the on state. At that moment, there may be chance for the electrical spark if we operate that switch at high voltages. If there is a switch at railway station for 25,000, if they do not use simply the switches we use at our homes. If they operate, okay, 25,000 volts on, if they switch on that 25,000 volts supply, that may give shock to that person who is operating that switch. Even in electrical laboratories also, they do not use these types of switches for operating high ampere rating motors. Those switches are absolutely, they are different. Okay, so here these switch type fuses we prefer to use at the low voltage level only. We do not suggest these switch type fuses at the high voltages. Okay, and there is a open type fuses. Those fuses are open and we can replace, like we observe at the homes. Those open type fuses we can use either at the low voltage and high voltage. And there is a cartridge fuse. If I am using a metallic wire and if it is shielded by some glass material, those fuses are called as cartridge fuses. We can use these cartridge fuses either in the low voltages or in high voltages. And different other types of fuses are also mentioned here. This dropout fuse is similar to the expulsion type fuse in the high voltage. Whenever the more current is observed in that circuit, automatically that switch or the fuse which is acting like a switch here, we do not call fuse as a switch, it will automatically disconnect. That's why this dropout fuse is also acting like a switch, open type switch. When the overcurrent flows through the circuit, it acts like an open circuit and it always disconnects the circuit when overcurrent observes. Fuses are classified into two types. One is AC fuse and the second one is DC fuse. AC fuses are classified into two types: low voltage fuse and high voltage fuse. Low voltage fuses we are using cartridge fuses, we are using switch type fuses, we are using and we are also using different types of fuses which are suitable at the low voltages, and high voltage fuses we are particularly mentioning either cartridge fuses we can use or expulsion fuses we are using, which are capable of holding the high voltages. This does not mean we always use all these types of fuses. Depending upon our requirement, we use different types of fuses. In our electronics, we do not observe all these different types of fuses. In the majority cases, we use the glass cartridge fuse that is sufficient for our electronic equipment.